Hello, this is Dwight Mutonono, also known as Mnyazi, also known as Mutos. We are in Acts chapter 24. We are continuing with our book study on the book of Acts. And today we are picking up the story from where it was left off last time. Claudius Lysias had brought Paul, managed to get him away from Jerusalem over to Caesarea, where the governor Felix resided. This was to protect Paul because of a plot that was against him, and also to enable him to be heard by the governor, since he had said that he's a Roman citizen. So we're going to read from chapter 24, verses 1 to 9 today. 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We've enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the land. He's a ringleader of the Nazarite sect and even tried to desecrate the temple. So we seized him. By examining him yourself, you'll be able to learn the truth about all these charges we're bringing against him. The Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. Okay, so as we start this session, I'd like to talk about the embarrassment of Christianity in that first century, especially amongst the Gentiles. Remember, Luke is a Gentile himself. He's from Antioch, and much of his audience would have been from Antioch. This was a situation where their leader, the one who had really championed Christianity amongst the Gentiles, Paul, was now going to be in a Roman prison. And the end of this book, the end of Acts, we see Paul actually being transported to a Roman prison. And the embarrassment would have been that Christianity is led by a Roman prisoner, or somebody who is regarded as a criminal according to the Roman system. So, and the early church had to live with this stigma. It was an embarrassing stigma right from the beginning. Their leader, Jesus, had been crucified after trial as a criminal. They were not there, especially the Gentiles. They were not there in Jerusalem when the events happened. They heard about it, and they heard that their leader had died as a criminal. And now, here we have Paul, who had led them to the Lord, or who had started their churches, and he was also now a prisoner, and he was also going to be on trial in Rome. So this was going to be an embarrassment, and again, this is one of the reasons why we find that Luke really makes sure that he communicates well why it is that Paul is a prisoner and why he went to Rome as a prisoner. The presentation against Paul had been kept guard in Herod's palace for 5 days. And then this Ananias, the high priest himself, some elders, and a lawyer came to present the case against Paul. Tertullus was the lawyer who presented the case. His presentation started with a flattering praise of Felix and his leadership. Now, flattery was a standard way to open speeches, a way to curry favor in the first century. And again, even today, we find that people who want to curry favor with political leaders tend to flatter them. And when people flatter leaders, they probably in their hearts have a much lower view of the leader than what they say out in public. And even though it is true that Felix did quell some insurgencies and he brought some peace and so on, he was also known for some really violent use of force to repress people He was a corrupt leader. He was self-exalting. Of course, all of that is not mentioned by Tertullus. Tertullus gives some very flowery, flattering ways to describe Felix, and he talks that way to him. And if Luke's account of events reflects the amount of time taken to present this case, then the lawyer spent as much time flattering Felix as he did to present the case against Paul. The charges were threefold. He was a troublemaker who stirred up riots everywhere. That was number one. This charge would have political overtones. And it was saying that Paul was a seditious man. He was a man, a treasonous leader who deserved capital punishment. He was a man who was trying to lead a movement that would be against, or that would try to rise up against Rome. So this was a serious charge that Tertullus was bringing against Paul. The second charge was that he was a leader of a sect, which the lawyer described as a Nazarene sect. It was a very derisive way of describing Christianity. Christianity in those days, it would have been called the way. That was the standard description of what Christianity was. But what Tertullus was trying to do was to say that this is not part of Judaism. This was not, the continuation of Old Testament Judaism, but it was a new religion which was unknown to Rome. It was an illicit religion that that Christianity was. And he attempted to desecrate the temple. That was the third charge against Paul. Jews were permitted to execute any Gentile who went past the area assigned for Gentiles. And what they were then saying was that Paul, brought some Gentiles into areas that they were not supposed to be in. So he was attempting to actually do that. So this explained why they seized Paul, and that's what Tertullus was then saying. Immediately we have a challenge, because what Tertullus had presented was at variance with what Claudius Lysias had said in his letter. In Lysias' letter, Lysias had specifically said that he found that there was no charge against Paul that deserved death or imprisonment. So the lawyer was saying Paul was a seditious agitator, a disturber of the peace, and that Felix, as a Roman governor, was supposed to maintain that peace. Therefore, he needed to take action against Paul. So sedition is a very serious charge. It's the charge on which the Lord Jesus Christ was executed. In the book of Luke, chapter 23, verse 2, again, of course, it was a false accusation, but these are the words that they used. They said, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Christ, a king." So you see, they're basically claiming that Jesus is trying to upstage or remove the emperor and so on. And then, in verse 5 of Luke 23, says they insisted he stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. So these are very similar charges that they're beginning to give against Paul, that he is also a seditious leader. He's coming and he's a leader of this Nazarene sect. So Felix would see that these are new charges that Lysias had not heard or mentioned in the presentation of this case. And what would then be before Felix was that, okay, because I've got these two different stories, is this a situation where charges are being added midstream, which would be a violation of justice? Or maybe Lysias missed out some things that he should have taken note of. So what then transpires after this, after the lawyer presents, is that the Jewish leaders acknowledged that what the lawyer had presented was the true position. So further to the lawyer's presentation, the people, the chief priest and the elders who had come with the lawyer were now saying to Lysias, yes, Paul is a treasonous man who deserves death. It was almost like, the crowd saying, crucify him to the Lord Jesus Christ. So the lawyer presents the case. The Jewish leaders are saying, yes, Paul is a treasonous leader and he deserves the death punishment. That's the presentation of the case against Paul that was given to Lysias. That was given to Felix. And Felix now had a challenge of what does he do next. And of course, in the next session, we will hear what Paul says in response to these charges. And he basically answers all the charges one by one in a very clear way. So we'll be looking at that in the next session. You're blessed. Continue in God's favor.